So I know what you're probably thinking. How do you speedrun the presidency? There are set term limits for the presidency, so wouldn't every one-term president tie for the record? For a long time, that's what everyone thought, until one speedrunner came along and changed the way that the presidency of the United States was thought of. One speedrunner who not only cut down the record by almost 99%, but then has held that record for over 3/4 of the time since the introduction of the category. Quite honestly, we might not ever see anyone beat it. This is the history of the presidency of the United States. The premise of the US presidency is straightforward. Once you're inaugurated, your run starts as soon as you take the oath of office. On a run like this, the minutes and hours may vary by time of day when the runner actually takes the oath, so all runs are counted in days instead of measured down to minutes and hours to keep the playing field fair. Think of a bus that stops at a bus stop once a day. It's weird that the bus works like that, but for whatever reason it does. Maybe your city should have invested more money into public transport. Regardless, it doesn't matter what time you actually show up for the bus as long as you make it there before it leaves that day. So, you're sworn in. What then? Well, the run we know today was crafted by none other than George Washington. He was the first to determine what a run should look like and set the precedent for all runners after him. He served the entirety of his first term, but had bad luck with RNG and won his re-election campaign. Eventually, he realized at the end of his second term that he just didn't have to run for re-election and opted to end the run at the end of his second term. All in all, it was a decent run by standards at the time, since he was essentially setting the first ever record, 2,865 days. Enter John Adams. Adams had been the top runner for the vice president category for the past 8 years, yet all the while had had his eyes on his next goal, getting the world record for the presidency. This time, after the end of his first term, Adams got good RNG and lost his re-election to Jefferson. Because of that, his time ended up looking like this. And that kind of set the meta for the run. Start your term and try to end it before your second one begins. Two other runners, John Quincy Adams and Martin Van Buren, followed in John Adams' footsteps and got lucky with their RNG upon their re-election campaigns. Here's where Washington ended with his first run. And then Adams, Quincy Adams, and Van Buren, all at the same spot, right? Well, no actually. You'll notice that Quincy Adams and Van Buren's times are 1,461 days, while Adams is just 1,460. How did this happen? Aren't all term limits already set at a certain amount of days? How had Adams managed to pull this off? You see, there's a weird thing that happens within the in-game calendar every 4 years. The US presidency runs on the Gregorian engine, and there is a well-known issue with its internal clock system. It tends to drift and has to recalibrate itself. To do this, every 4 years, the calendar adds an extra day, ending in a year with 366 days. But, and here's where it gets really weird, this readjustment over time eventually throws off the internal timer even further than where it had been. After 400 years, the calendar is 3 days too far ahead. So how do you get rid of those 3 extra days? Well, every 100 years should be a leap year, right? Essentially, what the game engine does is change it so that 3 of those 400 years, that leap year, is no longer a leap year. So let's take the years 1700 to 2000 for example. 1700, 1800, and 1900 were not leap years. And who was president in the year 1800? You guessed it, John Adams. And that lack of a leap year was how John Adams was able to shave off a day from his record. But so far, no big time saves had really been found. No big glitches, no major skips. Nobody had really broken the game yet. But then, only a month into his run, a new runner pulled off one of the greatest world records in the history of speedrunning. Out of nowhere, William Henry Harrison did this. What had just happened? Never, and I mean never, has any game ever seen a time save like this. William Henry Harrison had just cut down the previous record by 98%. Nobody had once tried to attempt something like this, and he pulled it off flawlessly. I really can't stress enough just how monumentous this time was. How did Harrison do it? Well, at first, nobody was really quite sure, and due to the nature of how he ended his run, he wasn't really able to explain to anyone what his strategy had been. Most people assumed that he had taken advantage of the fact that the run starts at the beginning of March and near the end of winter when it was still quite cold out at the capital. Due to the survival mechanics of the game, anyone who went around outside without proper winter attire would rather easily come down with a cold. And Harrison very frequently walked around in the cold weather without a jacket. Not only that, he had also given a 2-hour-long inauguration speech consisting of 8,445 words without a jacket too. Clearly, this had been a strategy of his from the very start. I should mention, a few modern speedrunning historians think though that Harrison had just gotten insanely lucky RNG however. Apparently, the White House had been downstream of a sewer at the time, and Harrison had just drank tainted water. Honestly, these are just vague speculations at most. This run happened way before capture cards were a thing, so no footage of his run exists today, but based on what we do know of the run, it's pretty obvious that Harrison had planned this all out. And what happened next? Well, Harrison's time was truly extraordinary. So extraordinary, in fact, that that's where the record still stands, almost 200 years later. Since then, countless runners have come and gone, but nobody has come anywhere near where Harrison took it. 2 other runners are worth mentioning for their attempts, Zachary Taylor and James Garfield. Taylor attempted to take a similar approach to Harrison by poisoning himself with bad fruit and spoiled milk. Unfortunately, he took too long in the setup and was only able to end his run at 492 days. The other runner, James Garfield, decided to take a different approach. Garfield decided to walk around in public frequently without presidential protection, attempting to abuse the assassination feature. This, however, proved to also not be as effective, and Garfield ended his run at 199 days. While we may honestly never see a run as good as Harrison's, I'd like to think that someday, someone will be able to make a sub-30 run. If not in my lifetime, I'd like for my kids, or maybe grandkids, to one day see that. That'll probably be hard though, not just because of Harrison's insane world record, but because in today's economy, I can't afford to have kids. Thanks for watching.